Okay, good morning. This is day number 148 of making little videos to describe a day or thought, the life of schizophrenic. My name is Dominic. On day 17 of these videos, I describe why I call myself schizophrenic rather than the term targeted individual. On day 45, I express why I make these videos in a 3-minute intro, and there's the rest of the day's video. And on day 138, I give some idea about the symptoms I experience as a schizophrenic, my experience with schizophrenia, and not all the symptoms are there, but a good chunk of them to kind of give an idea. And, uh, I think I am not diseased or crazy, but I'm subject to what NATO terms cognitive war, what other people have termed psychological warfare in the past, and what the Chinese describe as neurostrike weaponry, you know, and I read the little thoughts out of books and express some ideas and give some idea about maybe why I would have been targeted with the schizophrenia infliction, and I guess it's to humanize me to some degree as to combat the stigma of mental illness. And all right, so I started off. I wanted to allude to something in day 71 videos. It discusses how March, there's like some sort of ritual thing going on in March with me. It pertains to a lot of things that happen in March, including wars starting. I wrote a blog post right before I got kind of a heavy, overt schizophrenic symptoms around the time of the Arab Spring, and I discussed how the wars kind of happen on commemoration dates of other wars and everything, and it seems like it's part of a calendar, like a ritualistic calendar or something, like a reckoning of debts and stuff like that. And it was called War Subverts Reality. I think it's like chapter 13 of my book that I have posted on my Facebook page and on my Threads account, and I think it's even posted on Substack or whatever. So it's on medium.com called Unveiling the Schizophrenic Tradition. Anyways, so I wanted to point out day 71, I discuss how March typically, there's wars kind of start in March or February, end of February, March. I know it's like coming out of winter, but there was commemoration of dates seemingly happening around March, starting of wars and stuff. Okay. So I just referred to day 71. I noticed that Trump is gaslighting everybody with the Iran war. Like he's coming out and saying, I come out and I see a headline and it says, uh, "We didn't start this war," and it's like you very clearly started this war because you were referring to the fact that you were not going to start a war with Iran in your election, and then now you're saying, "Oh, the war in Iran was already happening." So it's like, well, then why did you use the language, "You won't start a war with Iran" if it was already happening? So he's just a liar. And he also says it's not about regime change, and then he has other people come out and they say stuff like, "We'd love if the regime changed and we just killed all their leaders, but it's not about regime change." And so they're lying about it. Uh yeah, so I guess it gets into like the idea that we can just bomb countries into democracies, and it doesn't seem likely that's going to happen. And uh, you know, they have surrogates coming out saying that we've gone around legitimizing Iran, and I don't really think we have. We haven't entered into cooperative agreements. Obama's agreement with Iran was kind of like. It seems like we've referred to Iran as the axis of evil for 25 years. That's not really legitimizing a leadership of a country. And we funded Iraq warring against Iran and everything, and doesn't really match up the history that people are saying. I'm not saying that I'm an expert or whatever, but some of it is just like, that doesn't sound right. When I hear people say like, uh, like Iranian activists saying, or pro-war Iranian activists who are saying stuff like, uh, we legitimized Iran all these years as a country, and that's why the pro-democracy activists couldn't succeed. And I don't. That doesn't. And they're using it now to justify, oh, we should invade with boots on the ground and fight a war for democracy, and it doesn't really add up. And I'm reminded of something I wrote in college, which might be why I have schizophrenia now. And it was like the idea that the West evangelizes, through the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment had an evangelist quality to it, where we were constantly trying to spread our way of thinking and humanist thinking everywhere in the world, or with like the Western Enlightenment ideals and everything. And I think it's even written in like the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson. Kind of, he has that kind of Enlightenment evangelism kind of thing. And so uh, it has its positive qualities, but its negative qualities, when it's attached to the barrel of a gun or a bomb, is not really positive. And I think we can kind of make that assessment now as people living in the 21st century. So uh, uh, that's my thought on it. Because it's like, uh, you see all the depictions of people dying, and it's like, using murder, like, we'll murder you into democracy. And okay, so yeah, Trump, he came into power criticizing globalism, like that whole movement, the Maga movement was like anti-globalist supposedly, and it's like, not really, because America didn't stop being globalist when, I mean, the Earth is a globe. The global capitalist economy is global. The imperial world order, or whatever, the Darwinian world order that I talk about, is like, it's all global and everything. And so it's like, he's just gone from being a global partner to, in particular areas, partner to particular groups of people around the world, to a bully. And so he's now a global bully rather than just a global partner to a large section. America was a global bully to particular people also in the past. So Trump has just expanded the bully status of America. America is now a bully to more people under the Trump watch, and a bully to people who previously were allies and bullying other people. And so that's my thought on that. Like, you're not anti-globalist, or the idea that the world, and it's a kind of like a utopian idea that the world, and that's not to say like utopia is a concept that can be fruitful for us considering the world. I write that, and I think in my book it is like, uh, well, it's an idea, like the idea of utopia, like it, it's just an idea of like trying to improve upon or perfect a societal setup, and the idea that you can, if we don't make some sort of like something that if we looked at it, in the future from our eyes now, we would say, man, that's utopian or whatever. But that might be the future, the only future that we can create, and where we all live or whatever. So I think, I you know people have said that. And I think, what's her, Kaitlin Johnstone said that, and she's a writer, and she's a activist, or she's a writer on the internet or whatever. And so uh, there's journalists, and she said that, and it's like, it's very true. But like, the idea that right now, that if we go into our own local boxes, like we don't interact with the outside world, and we just concentrate on our own local area, and we live off our local space, is and we have countries that have borders, and we don't let people pass through and everything, and we don't let people migrate or engage in commerce with each other and everything. And it's like, that whole idea is kind of utopian in its own way. It's its own type of utopia. Like, we'll have this bubble utopias, like multiple bubble utopias all around the world, like separated utopias or whatever, and that nobody's gonna migrate, and that it's all gonna be go really well, and there'll be no wars or anything or whatever. And it's like it's not really the way the world works, and it's never really worked that way. The world's been kind of global. Even if you go back to before Columbus or whatever, there's evidence that the civilizations were global. If you look at like how the civilizations formed and everything, and like the matching symbology of the civilizations, like well something was going on where it was like kind of global, I think. And so, uh, anyways, Trump is like he's just a global bully instead of a global partner to a lot of people, and that's my thought on that. I was gonna talk about I had a few weeks ago. I uh, listened to a Gaia episode about Royal Rife, and he is a scientist from like the 1930s and 20s or whatever, and he was into bioelectricity basically, or frequency to heal cancer. And supposedly he healed cancer in about 16 lab rats. And then the University of Southern California, I believe, at Scripps College, Scripps Institute in San Diego, they did a human trial on, I think, I'm not sure how many people they did the human trial on, but it was like 90% of the people, or I think 14 out of 16 people. I don't think it was 16 rats. I think it was like 14 out of 16. He did it on rats first and it worked. And then they did it on people, or uh, and he cured pretty much all of them from cancer. And so this science was going to go, the episode that Gaia does explains that how there was documented evidence that this was going to be like a big deal in the medical establishment among players or whatever. But then what happened was they decided they were going to suppress it because it would have upended the whole industry, and they engaged in what was called lawfare on Royal Rife, and they subverted, or they not subverted, they suppressed his research, and they even burned down his buildings where he had housed the documents for the research and everything. And so he ended up not being able to go forward with his research, and it was lost. And so I started to think like maybe the secret societies of the world took that technology and developed it on their own and a way, and it was a way to control their societies because they could control life and death with this technology. And I've actually experienced some of that technology, and I start to think like, somebody could uh, it's like they're controlling life and death, and they're deciding, or they have that control, and it's like they get to decide. They play God with it, and I think that's what's going on. And you can see the medical establishment now is starting to go into this frequency technology for bioelectricity, electronic frequency for curing diseases and stuff, and or medicine and stuff. And so it's starting to come online now, all like almost 100 years later. And so it's like it's initial stages on the public area, but then you have to wonder like, well, what goes on behind the scenes. And I'm not saying it's all nefarious, but it could be a way of control, and that's the control aspect is kind of nefarious. Just the thought like that it is in existence or whatever. And so yeah. All right, so I was going to talk a little bit. Today is March 3rd, and there's a primary in Texas for Senate. And I thought it's funny that John Cornyn's name is John Corney. So I thought that was funny. But Jasmine Crockett versus Tellerico, and I'm for Tellerico, even though I don't know a lot about Jasmine Crockett. But from what I've seen of them, just a brief little bit I have seen, I get the sense that Tellerico is kind of better for nationally, and maybe even Texas or whatever. So it's like I don't know a lot about Texas politics, but he just seems to have an approach where it seems like he's going to break away from the shitty type of politics from the 20 teens and embrace the good type of politics from the 20 teens. And I'm not saying like all the politics of the 20 teens on the left or Democratic side was bad, but there was a good part section of it that was just kind of like shitty type of politics or whatever, and kind of undermining like average people, or undermining, people, just undermining the lower class of people in general. And it seems like Tellerico's kind of a break from that, and he doesn't pit people against each other, and he has an approach where it's more like he's going to bring people into the fold and lead them towards uh, an end goal or whatever. And I like his approach more. I think like it's kind of needed now when we have such a violent, hateful public or whatever. And I know there's a lot of the public that's very nice and peaceful and loving and everything. And so I'm just trying. I like that he speaks to those kind of better angels, and so I think that's kind of needed at this point in time. And so I like that he doesn't cede ground on Christianity, but he still is supportive of church and state separation, and he's supportive of women's rights. And I can say like I've noticed a couple things that are going on in that primary. For all right, so I'll say this: like both the candidates seem very intelligent and capable people, and like they can lead people to positive outcomes in our democracy or whatever. I just prefer I I think Tellerico's approach is better, but I will say that and I kind of agree with his messaging a little bit more. And I will say that there's two Senate spots in Texas. So if you have two quality candidates that are very popular, they're both drawing crowds and they're both doing really well. Uh, there's a way to get them both in the Senate. There's room for two senators in Texas. So I think the next primary would be in 4 years. Also, Tellerico has a chance to go national, I think. Anybody who's a senator from Texas, though, has a chance to go national. So you could probably say the same thing for Jasmine Crockett as a senator from Texas if she wins the general. I don't know if she's popular enough to win the Texas general election, but right. Trump is he's been such a he's got a lot of problems, and he's at the top of the Republican fold, and that's not going to be good for whoever's coming out of the Republican side. So it's ripe for tipping blue in Texas, and so yeah. Uh, but there's room for two senators in Texas, and then I think Tellerico is almost like if he loses this, he's got a way. He's got like kind of a groundswell of support where like he could take this thing he does and go to his campaign and maybe take the campaign nationally and try to win over people in a Democratic primary. I guess that's a long shot. I don't know a lot about politics like that and stuff, but like uh, he's getting high praise from people like Obama and stuff, and so it's like, yeah, that's what I think about Tellerico. And all right, so I was gonna get into something called Smoothie King because I drink smoothies, and I'm not gonna talk about it right now because uh, it's it's kind of stupid. But all right, I drink smoothies, and they don't like that I've gained weight, and so it's not because of the smoothies or whatever. I've actually gotten a lot more energized because I drink smoothies, and so uh, I don't take my naps during the day now because I drink a smoothie at mid morning, and it's powering me through my days or whatever. So it's all my other kind of it's eating, kind of snacking, and yeah, middle of the night, waking up at 3 in the morning and stuff. All right, so I'll stop here.